said I wouldn't talk about this until we got something real. Well, we have. We have a Williams car on an actual track. And indeed, this car is different, and Williams have been more than happy to roll with the trolls. Sure, it doesn't look as extreme or as intriguing as the Aston Martin machine penned by Adrian Newey at first sight. That in of itself will be very different come Australia, but there are some choices on this car which have got people talking. And I'm not talking about the decision to have light blue on the side pod. In fact, it actually makes them stand out, and only one of 3 teams that have elected to go down this route for 2026. Is this the right choice for them to make, or is it the wrong choice? We do not know right now, but it's a choice that they have made, and they explain why they've waited 10 extra days before they actually get their car out on a circuit. The team have gone a particular route with the front suspension. I'm not talking about the renders we got on Tuesday, which had no middle section at all. I reckon that was a rendering issue. Almost a little nod to when Haas put rear tyres on the front wheel hubs for their renders a couple of weeks ago. And I'm already prepared for you to say, oh, why should we even care? It's just testing, bro. Well, you can tell me all about it by purchasing a t-shirt with the very same statement on it, only available until February the 20th, because after that, it won't be testing anymore, bro. Link below. Anyway, 2026 is clearly going to turn F1 into something that looks familiar but behaves like a whole different animal. Yeah, the cars are smaller and lighter, but the lap itself will seemingly begin to change too. Because as we're used to, a typical lap consists of straights, corners, braking zones, and that's been the case since tracks were invented long before cars were even a thing. Going back to when cavemen went, ooh, wheel, car, track club, ooh! It's baked into our brains, but Williams have now realised, as well as maybe a couple of other teams, that it might be more than just going straight, brake, corner. It might be a little bit more complex. They do sound slightly different. They sound louder in the corners, and that is for a good reason. The engines are revving harder through the corners, all as a result of the different power unit configuration, which means that these engines will be working a lot harder than they used to. So the cars that may stand to do well in 2026 will be the ones that can provide a platform which is consistently in the operating window throughout in terms of the engine, during the straights and the corners. And the way that you can achieve this may be more impactful than what Mercedes and Red Bull have been able to do with their engine compression trick. 0.3 of a second per lap? If Ayo Komatsu's claim is anything to be believed, you could stand to gain with the right deployment and timing of your battery use up to 0.7 of a second per lap. So, as I said earlier in the week, what Toto's been shouting about and telling people to get their ball plot together might be a bit of a red herring or a misdirection. And the tactic that Williams chose to use is something that only the likes of Alpine and Cadillac have chosen to turn to as well. Focus on how the car's front end stays planted and loads its tyres, plus how cleanly it can convert driver inputs into energy flow. Smoothness. A corner taken a bit too greedily, therefore, may leave you short later on in the lap, so you may not have the electrical oomph to call upon in Sector 3. So you might end up with a lap where the driver doesn't look all that fast in the first couple of sectors of the lap, but then in the last complex, or maybe even the last couple of corners, going on to the final straight, you might see them suddenly just go whoosh! You know, a sleeper lap. Therefore, it turns the argument into what is the best way to build upon the relationship between the driver and the battery. And I know that many of you hardcore petrol heads out there will be shaking in your boots about that and be thinking, ooh, well, Formula One's just like Formula E. Well, you might actually have a point there, since many Formula E drivers are being called upon by Formula One teams to act as some kind of consultant. And in the case of Williams, what they're choosing to do, and going against the grain of pretty much everyone else, and especially in the top 4, which they're trying to strive to get into, they didn't design some really wacky and tripped out aero package like we're all used to. We're all used to seeing that, and well, we reacted the way we saw when Adrian Newey's Aston Martin broke cover, which may not be the final product. No, they're deciding to go down mechanical grip. And sure enough, Williams have been pretty cagey with their visuals, only providing one official image of the shakedown, and even that was in sunset, and the renders, like I said earlier, did mask the truth with having a little bit of a mistake that we all laughed at and pointed at, but throughout all of the secrecy and all of the laughs at his expense, VALS has said to keep an eye on that particular area of the car. Just enough to make some of us suddenly stop laughing and go, what do you mean? Alpine doing this too? And the way that they bedded themselves in with Mercedes and actually look pretty solid and competent, the 4th most amount of laps gained at Barcelona, that's another team to look at as well. Because when you stop to think about it, and I don't really need the foam of doubt for this one, If you have a car which is planted throughout the entire lap and actually responds well to your inputs, you might actually get the most out of the brand new power unit, because if you end up with a twitchy car with a narrow operating window that the driver can't really work well with throughout one corner to the next corner, then what good is it really? Unless you're an absolute megastar of a driver, which in the case of Aston Martin does not bode well for Lance Stroll. And not to mention the driver's mental load will be much heavier. So if you have a mechanically predictable car, it allows the driver to think ahead and save brainpower. And it does make me think that academic drivers could thrive in this brand new spec of Formula One. Kimi Antonelli, oh, he's going to love this. Oscar Piastri, I think he might love this too. Carlos Sainz, oh, don't get me started on Carlos. In fact, no, I'll talk about Carlos anyway later. So Williams electing to go with a very surprisingly bold front suspension configuration that none of the other front-running teams have actually decided to go with, and a car that may provide you the same thing time and time again, lap after lap, and provide you consistent information, and you therefore build trust with that particular machine. So that means you can rely upon it to deliver every single time you hit an apex and know exactly when to deploy the right energy at the right time to be able to get the best lap possible. And now they've got the car out there, they have some real world conditions in which to work upon all of the virtual test work that they've been undertaking since, well, they didn't go to the Circuit de Catalunya. And yes, them cancelling their appearance there did mask all of the good work that they had been doing and undermined much of the optimism around that team, but thankfully the pitchforks were put away slightly when Aston Martin broke cover with their car and our monkey brain neurons activated and we were going, ooh, ooh, ooh. And it just lends even further notions of them missing Barcelona might have been the best for them after all, because it allowed them to really focus on that virtual test simulator and actually build something that might actually translate well into reality. They actually did stuff before this Silverstone shakedown. And yes, it certainly helped when Mercedes did a lot of the legwork in terms of the power unit and the drivetrain department of 1,100 laps of theirs throughout all of the two customer teams and the works team. So that does remove at least one variable. I mean, it doesn't solve all their problems, but it's certainly one off their list. And besides, I think their main mission is to make sure that their models, both real world and virtual, match spot on to avoid a correlation issue, an often heard term in recent years that can easily bite a big name team. I'm looking at you, Red Bull. But that might be hard for us to grasp because, well, numbers do have punch, because we saw Mercedes bag 500 laps in the real world and we nod and go, ooh, big number. It's a nice number to have. But it may not be the only number to pay attention to, especially for those in the know. If Williams have reason to believe that what they had in the virtual world is as close as they can get a one-to-one copy of their real-world car, then them not showing up around Barcelona? Pfft, no biggie. Especially for how public it turned out to be. Yes, what they chose to do and skip that first test might still end up being a little bit of a risky bet, but it certainly allowed them to think in private for that little bit longer that what they choose to bring out for that shakedown and for Bahrain is something that they really have a lot more confidence in, to iron out the final bugs that may prevent them actually ending up with a very long list, such as Audi, and maybe avoid a potential development death spiral which wastes their time for many months. I'm looking at you, Aston Martin of 23 and 24, and Vowles did admit that these cars have turned out to be more complex than they first thought, and that what they thought they had in place was simply not up to snuff, and they had to rely on older processes and workflows to actually get the job done, which were either not as efficient or took a little bit longer. Simply put, it overwhelmed their production systems. They're not ready for prime time, and it does make me think that their 2028 target of being right up to where they want to be is that little bit more justifiable. They've come so far in the last few years, but they're not quite there yet. So at that point, the worst thing you can do is bring a half-integrated car to a showdown where we've actually seen everything play out, especially from atop a tree. Because what good would it do if you just turn up to something just for the sake of keeping up appearances to keep the audience from not lashing out at you or making fun of you or deriding you? No, it's best to serve something up that you know is to your taste and that you are actually happy with to then go and develop further, because who knows what they might have discovered around Barcelona which might send them off in a completely different direction to what they might have gotten from their shakedown yesterday. 10 days can make a very big difference in Formula One. What they chose to do meant that there was less guesswork, but James did say there were minor issues to fix ahead of Bahrain, but at least they were just that. Minor issues. Therefore, the way you can read Williams right now is better late than never, and with a car that is alive and working reasonably well. instead of rushing out something for us all to see which might not work as well after all, and in plain sight for us all to gawp at and take pictures at. So maybe their virtual approach went according to plan. Enough to assure them that the real car would behave typically. Not perfect, but workable. And all that data that Mercedes HPP amassed, especially when it comes to revving and energy delivery, will provide Williams, their longest-serving customer, plenty of clues and confidence about how to keep the internal combustion engine operating in a useful window, whilst managing the electrical side too. And then see how it's moved on from their initial spec that they might have worked with, and then plot about how they can then further refine their own processes that they are choosing to do as their own team. A system which the driver sees as completely seamless. It doesn't judder from being mostly combustion power to then electrical power, and then sends the car into a little bit of a twitch, and then suddenly makes you question your life choices. And maybe question whether or not you need to change your trousers. You know, a continuous stream of power, because I must admit, having driven a hybrid car, I much prefer a consistent power delivery instead of things that move from really fast acceleration to then just burbling along at cruising speed. The Hyundai Kona, yeah, it's alright, but I would very much prefer something that was a little bit smoother. Yes, it isn't an F1 car, but you get the idea. You want something that you can work with and that you trust. And Carlos, well, he's one smooth operator, and now this is the time where we've got to talk about him. And why this whole thing of him being at Williams will really reap benefits. You thought it reaped benefits last year. Just you wait till this year. It'll help out Alex too. Because Albon has a complete understanding of the Williams ecosystem to back up Sainz's approach. And he is a man who will this season eclipse Nigel Mansell's total of 95 starts for the team and become their longest serving driver of all time. That tells you a lot in how much faith the modern team has in Alex, as well as the historically savage attrition rate under the engineering first mantra of Frank Williams and Patrick Head. As for the Spaniard, well, we all know how much he likes detailed feedback. I mean, you saw the chart that I showed you a while back. He can talk your ear off if you let him. And in an era where a lap has a very specific energy budget and every single choice you make eats into that particular budget, you're going to need somebody who is absolutely on it and is not afraid to tell you if you are doing something that is wholly inefficient and not within his remit. Someone like Carlos could be absolute gold dust to try and unleash your potential and improve your workflow even more. We saw the development throughout the whole of 2025 because at the beginning of the year, operationally speaking, they were a little bit in the growing pains phase, and throughout that year, yes, it was still there, but it did improve to the point where by the end of it, they had 2 podiums to their names. They were 5th place in the Constructors. They are, for 2026, in the pit lane, right next to Ferrari, as a result. And the last time we could say that was, well, you might not have been born. And this pairing could easily be one of the most profitable and efficient on the grid, because these two were forged in the pits of Red Bull's program during the Marco days, conditioned now in their senior years to eschew political gamesmanship and instead think of the greater good. And it's manifested itself thus far with a pair who sound really calm with their car now they've actually gotten to drive it. Yeah, I know, you might be thinking I'm drinking plenty of copium right here, but I must tell you that I'm not a Williams fan per se, but I want them to do well. Much like how I like to see McLaren doing well and Ferrari doing well. Those 3 teams are part of Formula One's history, and to see them struggle or be right near the back, it just feels unnatural in a way, you know what I mean? But all of the confusion and delay that we've seen from Williams, it's clear that this road to where they are now has not been a bed of roses. Because the delay has exposed weaknesses in their production approach still, that they had to fall back on older techniques to get the job done. They know all too well that their car right now isn't going to win titles or multiple races either again. It's going to be another couple of years until they can actually go for maybe a championship campaign, where hopefully for them, their old processes can be finally thrown in the bin, or maybe sent to their heritage department. A team trying to modernise can break its own workflow, and it makes sense since James did say that one time he intends to break everything. Maybe he broke it too quickly. You know those experiences where you are given a room which is full of old stuff, broken stuff, you're given a really big hammer and then told go to town? Your old school brain, your monkey instincts suddenly go, yes! I think that's what happened with Williams. But it would be unfair or even downright wrong to suggest that all of the stuff that we've seen the last few weeks is enough to completely condemn the team, that they're a bunch of no-hopers, that there is no good fortune for them, and that you want James Vowles' head on a platter. that another false dawn of Williams is locked in yet again. Because the team might be onto something which might be the ultimate philosophy for this brand new specification of car, but they might stumble their way toward it. And Williams, they've been doing a lot of stumbling around, but they are still on their feet. They've not fallen down yet. And if they do reach their destination, which provides them good fortune and good results for the next few years, it won't matter how badly they got there, so long as they find the droid that they were looking for. And yeah, the last couple of years where James has been breaking everything, it just goes to show that the process of completely changing the way you go about things can get ugly, and it can make you look utterly, utterly dreadful. Or make you absolutely hate it. I still remember the blowback they got when Logan Sargent got benched and Alex Albon got put in his car because they didn't have a spare chassis. That backlash towards James, that was vicious. But that was par for the course as they were trying to change things up. A smooth evolution is a fallacy, my friend. It's absolutely impossible. You are going to face pitfalls along the way or go down the wrong direction, and it's up to you to try and do a course correction. So them getting their car out for a shakedown later than everyone else might be evidence that they are actually on the right path and they are choosing to do something the right way instead of doing something the rushed way. And that is something that I've noticed with the coverage that folks tend to miss. This season, 2026, could be the first season for Williams where all of the stuff they've actually been putting their time and resources into could pay off for them much quicker than before. Because everyone's learning a new rulebook at the same time, that's what happens with regulation changes. And for Williams, they are now in a place where they believe they can leap forward. Unlike where they were in 2022 with the last big rule change, where they were in no place to try and leap up the grid, they fell flat on their face as a result, sending Nicky Latifi off toward a business degree and a fledgling tequila business. It's kind of why I hate yet understand the whole "it's just testing, bro" dismissal chestnut. It feels so lazy to me, and it feels so sad to dismiss all of the talk and chatter and discussion about these cars as they are finding their feet and we're getting used to the overall look and feel and the general aura of the season. And it's not been that long for people to go from, well, I'm not really sure about how these cars are going to look, to go, I'm actually getting used to these cars, and even some are going, oh, these cars are really, really nice to look at. So with us more used to the way the cars are going to look and how they will appear on track throughout different aspects of the circuit, we can then switch to the fact that, well, Williams is now in a familiar place as to everyone else. They've now got a car in the physical realm, they've driven it around the track, it looks okay, and they can actually start to do the business of refining their car, and maybe finding some performance. So if Williams show up in Bahrain with comments that sound vanilla and conventional, no hiccups or maladies, and they just get on with the business and plot out the laps time and time again, all the stuff that happened before will end up being nothing more than opening chapter peril of a Williams resurgence. You know, something to get people hooked before then witnessing something bigger. At the same time, though, it could still produce a completely different story, where the car looks absolutely messy. They barely get out there. The drivers, in unison, both Alex and Carlos, go, hey, we need to understand more of the car. It just gives off a really big feeling of discontent. That same story could easily turn into a life lesson about putting ambition ahead of readiness. Either way, we're all excited to see how the story is going to pan out. But I do wish to come back to that front suspension one more time, because it's still a really fascinating topic because of the fact that only Cadillac and Alpine have chosen to go this way. Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, McLaren, they ain't doing that. Why are Williams doing that? Because when outlets are bothering to report on something like this, the front suspension, it suggests that Williams are willing to accept development risk in a core architecture choice that they really can't back out of for the rest of the year. And teams don't do that lightly. You only do it when you believe it's worth the risk. The reward? Well, the car that keeps its tyres contact patch the happiest could be an absolute beast if it allows the power unit to do its thing freely. Allow the tyres to work efficiently so you can turn energy into acceleration with much less loss of grip or control, because a tyre that slips wastes energy, even though it does look cool. It's their interpretation of what they think is the best way to have efficiency in terms of performance, having as much contact with the road as possible and preserving the tyres and making sure that you get the most out of your engine. And you combine that with the Mercedes and Red Bull engine compression ratio, you're going to get something which is really, really useful and easy to drive. And it just points to the notion that it's not all about how the car looks in terms of aero. There are different elements in what makes a Formula One car go fast that we simply cannot see, nor will we ever see, unless it's a major crash and the car is in bits. As was the case with the initial reveal of the Aston Martin. We tend to hunt for wings and side pods and wild bodywork. With the FW48, we looked at those side pods and go, Ooh, that's chunkier than everyone else's. That must be why the car's heavy. But the engineers who work on surfaces other than the bodywork may have the last laugh here, after their teams dealt with a narrative mess, and for a team that's busy trying to shed the outdated and underfunded guise of recent times, to look more up-to-date and proactive. And all of the noise around this team is especially distracting and undermining because it just shows that with this team, every single problem they face will be seen by many as an excuse to prove that they are on the verge of collapse. And perhaps a little bit of proof as to why you out there perhaps may want Williams to fail. Now, I'm not talking about you over there. I know you're all right. You like Williams. I'm talking about you. So what Williams did with this surprise Silverstone shakedown, and much earlier than expected, was to silence all of that chatter and prove to us all that we have a car. It's working the way we want to, and there's something here that we do wish to show you, but you can't see fully yet. They are starting to control their narrative, take back control even. James talking to us all in a lecture format is appreciated, and there are many people who respect that, but for others, it's just seen as, oh, that's just making up excuses. No, they want to see an actual car. Well, they got a car. Happy now? Well, no, for some of you probably not. And who knows, Williams might be early to the party when it comes to the right formula for 2026. And sometimes, in the case of Williams, for example, being early means looking like you're being late. And what Williams have chosen to do is that they would prefer to be right rather than be seen. I mean, they might still be wrong with what they've chosen to do with this front suspension and everything else on that car, and Formula One is a very cruel sport, let's not forget that, and the universe does love a little bit of dark comedy. But I think what Williams are trying to do now is just move away from the story arc of, oh, a midfield team that hopes for glory absolutely fails. Where have we seen this before? No, what we're seeing from this team is that they would rather build a car that makes sense rather than gets attention. And the teams that win races throughout the next couple of years may be the ones that have a car that makes sense all of the time and is not something that is unpredictable. Haas's Ayo Komatsu told us this about deployment being a really big factor here, and Williams is another team that is saying the exact same thing. That the best approach may not be simply the engine or the aero. The best approach may be primarily mechanical. And another mechanical action that you can take is to take your cursor or finger over here to click on that for the next video, or down there to get yourself the It's Just Testing Bro shirt for a limited time. I'll see you whichever way you go.